And welcome to the newest episode of Dino, only on RideRadio.ca and all of our other affiliations. My name is Eldin Atkin, and today we are continuing our conversation, or I guess discussion or description of Canadian dinosaurs. So if you're just tuning in for the first time, I'm happy to have you here. Long-time viewers, or I guess like quote-unquote short-time viewers, we've only been doing this for about a month. Thanks for sticking around. I really appreciate just being here and listening to all these fun dinosaur facts. So the concept of the show, I'm going to talk about all things dinosaurs. We have 37 Canadian dinosaurs. We've gone through about 12 to 15 of them. And today we're finishing off the D dinosaurs on getting into the E dinosaurs. We have quite a journey ahead of us, but let's just jump right into it. So our first off dinosaur is a very special one, I think in most people's hearts, is Dromaeosaurus. Now, its name means running lizard. You might think to yourself, what is a Dromaeosaurus? Well, it is kind of what all raptors are named after. Velociraptor, all those things, they're all Dromaeosauridae, or Sauridae, Dromaeosaurids, which are this family of dinosaurs, raptors. Jurassic Park, Velociraptors, Dakota Raptor, Utah Raptor, all these big raptors that everyone kind of knows. This is the first one that we've kind of named the species after. So, it was named by William Diller Matthew and Barnum Brown in 1922. Now, it's known from several specimens, but it's not well represented, unfortunately. It was first discovered in 1914, but again, wasn't named till 1922. It was found in the Dinosaur Park Formation, and the teeth that were linked to this dinosaur were actually found in the Prince Creek Formation. So, a little farther away, not the same area, but all the same dinosaur. So this is kind of a smaller dinosaur. It was up to 2 meters long and under a meter tall, so kind of like an angry turkey. About 6 feet long, and it could have weighed approximately 55 pounds. So a good turkey-sized dinosaur. Most raptors were small. Its closest living relative is Dakota Raptor. Now, Dakota Raptor was a monster comparatively, but this one's a little small guy. So it was found in Alberta and Montana, and it lived during the Cambrian of the Cretaceous period. So that's about 66 million years ago. This is from dinosaurpictures.org, said 66 million, but the website Natural History Museum, which is a Canadian/UK website, said it was 76 to 74 million years ago, and then Wikipedia has it listed as 80 to 69. So let's just say it lived between 80 to 66 million years ago. I know it's a wide spectrum, but sometimes you're not entirely sure. So when they first found Dromaeosaurus, it wasn't really understood nearly as much as it is today. Dromaeosaurids is the name of the group. As I said, raptors were named after this. And they were named after the very first Dromaeosaurus found as a holotype, or like the precursor of the species. Now, a more common name, as I said, was the raptor, but after years of finding more and more of these dinosaurs, it kind of filled in the blanks of what was lost or what we didn't know. It's really tough, again, in paleontology. You don't really know all the facts until you found every bone. And this is a dinosaur where we have not found all the bones and probably won't find all the bones, unfortunately. So the most, most classic Dromaeosaurids, it had the sickle toe. So the sickle toe, it's this, when you see dinosaur feet, velociraptor feet, they have the 2 toes, and their third toe is like a sickle. And that sickle is like a killing toe, they call it, because it's a pressurized piston of sharpened claw that just goes punch and punches into things. Now, like most Dromaeosaurids, it had this. Very like raptor-esque, almost all of them have it. And unlike these other raptors, though, it had a proportionately larger and stronger jaw compared to other Dromaeosaurids. So that kind of means that the dinosaur used its jaws more than its claws, which does happen occasionally. The larger skull also had a bigger nasal cavity, which kind of suggests that it could smell better. It makes sense when you're smaller, you hunt smaller prey, maybe using your jaws to catch insects or rodents or amphibians or other lizards or other dinosaurs, so it makes sense. And the last little bit is really cool and kind of like it's grown in popularity more today than it has in the past. So looking at Dromaeosaurus, we at first thought it wasn't feathered. So raptors for a long time, we didn't think any dinosaurs were feathered. But then we found certain fossils of certain raptors that have feathers. So it could have been feathered, or at least had some feathers somewhere on its body. There's a species found in China that had quote-unquote proto-wings. So basically it had on its arms these big feathers. Now, the feathers wouldn't be really good for much. Maybe aerodynamics. Maybe it was good for like jumping to kind of give it that little oomph. It's not Microraptor that could glide, but it's something like that. So we know they had proto-wings, and that thought was kind of like, okay, maybe other ones had it as well. So this led some people to think that raptors in general just always had wings, especially the ones towards the end of the dinosaur era. Those ones were kind of the most specialized. Now that's Dromaeosaurus. Moving on to another one is a much harder to pronounce name. And I should have looked up the phonetics, but I didn't because I'm gonna try my best. So it's Dromiceiomimus, which Dromiceiomimus means emu or emu mimic. So it lived approximately 80 to 65 million years ago. Originally, Dromiceiomimus was thought to be a species of Struthiomimus. And Struthiomimus is a bird mimic. They're from the family of ornithomimuses, which are bird mimics. Struthiomimus and Gallimimus, they're more well-known. Gallimimus is from Jurassic Park, if you've ever seen that. So when it was first discovered in 1926 by William Park, he again thought it was a Struthiomimus, I guess, family member species. So he compared the postcranial, which is the skull, to other of the ornithomimus, and they're like, oh, it's close enough. Let's just hope for the best. Now that was found in the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, so Alberta. Great to have it there as well. It wasn't until Dale Russell, who was a Canadian, who reviewed all Canadian ornithomimids, that Dromaeosaurus was given the proper light it needed. You see this a lot in paleontology. They take dinosaurs, they say, hey, this one doesn't look distinct enough, let's put it in this category. And then later on, someone comes along with a better magnifying glass and more bones, and they say, well, wait a minute, this one looks a little bit different. So what kind of happened at that time? Around the same time that he was fixing the classification of Dromaeosaurus, he was also adding to the genus by renaming the dinosaur Ornithomimus samueli to D. samueli. So he changed the name from Ornithomimus to Dromaeosaurus, which is cool. It's got another family member. Now it's got a brother or a cousin, I guess. There's a comparison to this other one called Ornithomimus Edmontonicus, which has some subtle differences. It's comparable, of course. And there's a huge controversy with this. So very similar dinosaurs found in the same area. Big size differences in certain cases. There was definitely some there were some changes, I would say, to things. Now, the size of this dinosaur was about 12 feet long and could have been up to 200 pounds. Looked a bit like, the one picture I saw was too small to put up, unfortunately, but it was like a big emu with claws. It's still kind of having this back and forth thing where, like, we don't really know. We think that it was an omnivore because other ornithomimids were omnivores, so they ate both plants and meat. It makes sense. The rest of the family did it. Why wouldn't this one? It is thought that based on others in its family, it could have been very quick, very fast, 45 to 50 miles per hour. So that's approximately like 70 kilometers an hour. And funny enough, like others in the family, it's going to say you're going to hear a lot of like others in the family. It had really large eyes, and then of course large eyes equal large brain in certain things, like ostriches, sort of. Big eyes, big brain, very good for like looking at things and catching things and thinking about things. It makes it a better dinosaur, but it had this large head and large brain with a very kind of weak and toothless jaw, so it wouldn't have been really adept at catching things with its teeth. Finally, in 2018, though, the argument of is Dromaeosaurus its own species was put to bed. A gentleman from, I think it was the ROM, went back and relooked and just said, you know what, it's distinct enough to not be considered this Edmontonicus. At the same time as well, synonymously, Edmontonicus and Dromaeosaurus are used as the same dinosaur. But he suggested that Dromaeosaurus would always have priority because it was found first. It's also a more represented dinosaur. So with that being said, like it's kind of been put to bed. We know it is a dinosaur on its own, and if it's used synonymously with another dinosaur, it's the priority. It was there first. He's number one. So that was Dromiceiomimus, which was hard to say. And our last one is it has a special spot in my heart. So Edmontonia, which name just literally means from Edmonton, and it was named after the Edmonton Formation where it was found. Now the Edmonton Formation's been changed now. I think it's the Horseshoe Formation now, but yeah, it's changed to the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, but it was originally called the Edmonton Formation, and thus it was named after it. So it was discovered in 1915 in the Edmonton Formation, but was later changed to the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, so that kind of sucks. It was named by Charles Mortran Sternberg. We heard about him before in 1928. So again, dinosaur that was discovered and then wasn't named. You see it happen a lot. It was part of the family of nodosaurids. So nodosaurids are like ankylosaurs, but a little smaller in some cases. So this one was about 6.6 meters, which is about 22 feet long, and could have been up to 1.6 meters tall. And the consensus is that it and its counter, it has like a cousin that would have probably weighed around 3 tons each. So they were big dinosaurs, armor plated. They lived during the Campanian of the Maastrichtian of the Cretaceous period. So that's around 76.5 to 65.5 million years ago, making it actually one of the last nodosaurs ever to exist. 64 million years ago, dinosaurs went extinct around that time period, and this dinosaur happened to be one of the last nodosaurs ever. Now, Edmontonia comes from the family of nodosaurids, as I said. The family is similar to ankylosaurs, but it's got some things missing. So they have narrower mouths, less armor, but also different armor in some spots, and no tail clubs whatsoever. So those tails, the well-known tail clubs of Ankylosaurus, and just like a normal tail. No tail club, nothing like that. So they have osteoderms. Osteoderms are basically like bone that has been hyper-reinforced. It's like plates. We talked about that in the first episode. Very cool, very interesting to see that as well. But with this armor that Edmontonia had, it had spikes as well. Now these big spikes were along the sides of its body and had 4 spikes that were larger, or I should say largest, that was kind of in the shoulder region. Now, these spikes wouldn't have done much to help it. It had to put up with the likes of Displetosaurus and Albertosaurus, which we talked about. We talked about Displetosaurus last time and Albertosaurus, I think, the first episode. Go back and check those out if you haven't. But at Edmontonia, these spikes wouldn't have helped it much. Like these dinosaurs are big, they're brutish. They would have just knocked it over and taken what they wanted. Again, unfortunately, what works with porcupines, you knock them over and they have their soft little bellies. And this guy did not have a good contingency plan for protecting his stomach. Now that being said though, the spikes could have been used for territorial combat. Again, it's hard to say. It could have been used for locking together, sort of like how deer do it nowadays. Deer, anything with horns or antlers, lock together the horns and antlers. This may have helped for getting a grip and kind of shoving matches, kind of like elephants. But we're not really sure. One thing we do know, though, is that looking at the fossils that Edmontonia has been found with, it lived in a very interesting climate. It was a climate of extreme wet and extreme dry. So probably like temperate, very like monsoon-like rainy periods, and then very dry, almost like a savanna. So with that being said, we found petrified trees in the same area, which lets us kind of confirm that these climates would have been very wet and very dry. It happens that way, and looking at other animals nowadays that live in wet and dry climates, especially reptiles or birds, you would think that since Edmontonia did lay eggs, it would have laid eggs in kind of time with the season. So probably the eggs were set to hatch for the wet season. Now there's a couple reasons why we think the wet season was the best season for these little guys. One, when you're a little dinosaur and you just hatched, you want to be able to make sure you can make it to adulthood. If you can't make it to adulthood, there's no point in even having the eggs. So during the wet period, vegetation would have exploded. It would have been vibrant and green and lush. And when you're a little dinosaur, you can hide in that green and lush area. With that green and lush area though, that's a lot of food for you too. When you're a little dinosaur and you got to eat to get big and strong, when you don't have to go far to find all this food, it makes it really easy to be able to just be in an area and survive longer until you can get to a point where you can leave said area. So that's kind of the cause and effect of that idea. Now, with this extreme climate, though, it also helped to preserve the bodies. So the thought is, since you have all these very dry riverbeds, like nowadays in savannas, Edmontonia would probably live around these riverbeds, and when those riverbeds got extreme floods, they may have jumped the banks, and Edmontonia could have drowned. With it drowning, it goes in the water. The silt and the mud and all this stuff would have caked over the body. So A, scavengers aren't getting to it. B, when you have this situation and then you have extreme heat where the riverbed dries up, it mummifies. So when you mummify, it really helps to kind of guess what the dinosaur looked like and getting a good representation of all the bones. So of all these Edmontonia that have died over the course of millions of years, we have approximately 21 specimens, and of those specimens, most of them have most of the bones intact. They weren't scattered. There was no scavengers getting to them. So it's really nice that you have this dinosaur that we can look at and say, hey, look at this thing. Problem is, osteoderms don't really fossilize well, and the spikes also didn't fossilize well. So we can kind of guess some things, but we can't really guess them all. Now, with that being said, though, that's Edmontonia. There wasn't a ton of information for all these guys. Plus, I don't want to keep it too long. I think these are nice, quick facts. Moving on to next week, or next episode, I should say, we have some really fun ones coming up. We have Edmontosaurus, which we talked about before. Edmontosaurus is a hadrosaur. We have Europlocephalus. That'll be fun. And Gorgosaurus, which is a tyrannosaur. So some big ones coming up next week. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As always, I'll link all the websites I use for information. I love that people are watching my show, and thank you very much for watching it. My name's Eldin. I'll catch you next time, and just enjoy.